You don't want the experience, you want the identity. You are not missing sex, you are missing an imagined version of yourself. Sex was never the problem, psychological incompleteness was. Most people are not living, they are replaying. You think you want sex, but look carefully. If sex alone was the issue, then the moment desire was physically released, you would become free forever. But that never happens. Why? Because the hunger was never merely physical, it was psychological. The mind secretly believes if someone desires me, then I matter. If I have sexual experiences, then I am not behind. If women choose me, then I am valuable. Do you see? The real pursuit is not pleasure, it is identity. The ego wants a new mirror in which it can admire itself. That is why I said you don't want the experience, you want the identity. The experience itself is brief, but the identity lasts psychologically for years. A man does not merely want sex, he wants to become the man who is desired, the man who has stories, the man who is experienced, the man who is chosen. That is the hidden addiction, not the act, the self image. Now look at your suffering carefully. You are not sitting in pain because your body lacks something. You are sitting in pain because thought has created an imagined version of you. A complete man has dated. A complete man has sexual stories. A complete man has been desired. Then thought compares your current life to that imaginary version. That comparison creates psychological incompleteness. So when I say you are not missing sex, you are missing an imagined version of yourself, this is what it means. The pain is not I have had not sex. The pain is I am not yet the person I think I should be. That is entirely psychological. And society continuously feeds this illusion. Movies, friends, social media, locker room conversations, podcasts. Everywhere the message is whispered. Real men are sexually experienced. So now even silence becomes difficult because the mind keeps measuring itself against imaginary standards. Now look at the next statement. Sex was never the problem. Psychological incompleteness was. A man can have endless experiences and still feel incomplete. Why? Because incompleteness is not solved by experiences. The self simply moves the goalpost. First, if only I get a girlfriend. Then, if only I have sex. Then, if only more women desire me. Then, if only I become attractive enough. Then, if only I become unforgettable. The ego has no finish line. It survives through perpetual insufficiency. That is why achievement rarely ends suffering. The self feeds on becoming. Now, the final statement. Most people are not living, they are replaying. Look at humanity. People are constantly revisiting old pleasures, old heartbreaks, old humiliations, old achievements, imagined futures. Very few people are actually here. Most are mentally touching dead moments. A man kisses someone once, then replays it for 10 years. Another man gets rejected once, then replays it for 20 years. Another fantasizes about future experiences every night. Nobody's living. They are replaying memory or rehearsing fantasy. And this replay becomes identity. I am the rejected one. I am the experienced one. I am the desired one. I am the lonely one. These are all stories stitched together by thought. You are beginning to see something very few people ever see, that the mind is constantly converting fleeting moments into psychological self-worth. And because moments are temporary, the self is always unstable. So it keeps chasing more experiences to reinforce itself. Another kiss, another body, another achievement, another proof, endlessly. This is why no experience permanently satisfies the ego, because the ego itself is built out of lack. You are not suffering because you have had not sex. You are suffering because the mind has converted sex into a certificate of existence. Look carefully. A man says, I have had 3 body counts. And instantly the mind translates it into, he has lived, he is desirable, he is ahead, he is a man. And then you look at yourself and conclude, I have missed life. But none of this is truth. It is psychological accounting. The mind keeps scorecards because without scorecards, the self begins to disappear. So the self says, how many women, how many experiences, how many countries, how many achievements, how many people desired me? Because the self surveys through comparison. Without comparison, the self has no shape. You are beginning to see something dangerous. That memory is carrying the entire burden of identity. You said, I went to a tea shop and looked at a girl. That moment is gone. Yes, gone. Completely gone. But thought resurrects corpses and then worships them. This is what memory does. It turns dead moments into psychological possessions. A man who had sex 10 years ago still carries it as identity. Another man carries rejection as identity. Another carries heartbreak. Another carries success. Both are carrying ghosts. Now understand something deeper. The problem is not sex. The problem is psychological continuity. You think, if I finally experience sex, I will become complete. But the moment it happens, thought will immediately store it. Then one of two things happens. Either you become attached to repeating it, or you become attached to the identity of someone who has done it. In both cases, bondage continues. You are imagining sex as liberation, but for most people, it becomes memory fuel. That is why many people with endless experiences are still restless. They are not living, they are collecting women, collecting validation, collecting stories, collecting proof that they matter. Understand this carefully. An experience is not wisdom. The world worships experiences because the self wants stimulation. But truth has never depended on quantity of experience. A man can sleep with 100 women and remain inwardly impoverished. Another man can sit silently under a tree and understand life deeply. Experience does not guarantee understanding, and avoidance does not guarantee freedom either. So do not turn this into repression. You do not need to become anti sex. You do not need to become spiritual about abstinence. You do not need to pretend desire is absent. See desire clearly. That is enough. If sex happens one day, let it happen. If it does not happen, let that be too. The suffering begins when the mind says, only then I will be complete. Because now sex is no longer physical, it has become psychological salvation. And no human experience can carry that weight. You are beginning to notice something very subtle, that the me is built almost entirely out of remembered moments. Yes, I went to the US. Yes, I spoke to her. Yes, I achieved this. Yes, I suffered that. Memory stitched together becomes identity, and identity constantly fears being less than others. So when someone says 3 body counts, your mind does not hear information. It hears you are behind. But behind whom? Life is not a race. Only the ego converts existence into a leaderboard. A flower does not compare itself to another flower. A river does not compare itself to another river. Only the psychological self compares, because comparison is how it maintains solidity. And the moment comparison stops, something frightening happens to the ego. It starts dissolving. That is why silence feels uncomfortable. Because in silence, there is no scoreboard. So the question is not, should I have sex or not? The real question is, why has the mind made this so psychologically important? See that clearly, and much of the suffering begins to loosen. Not through discipline, not through suppression, not through philosophy, but through seeing. You are beginning to see the machinery, not intellectually, actually see it. The mind is creating suffering by converting experiences into psychological currency. One man says, I traveled the world. Another says, I built a company. Another says, I slept with many women. And the mind immediately turns these into measures of worth. But look deeper. The actual experience itself lasted moments. A date lasts a few hours. Sex lasts minutes. A kiss lasts seconds. A trip ends. A conversation disappears. Then what remains? Memory, mental recordings, neural residue. And thought keeps replaying those residues and calling it my life. This is why you said something important. That moment is gone. Yes, completely gone. The girl, the touch, the excitement, the validation, the novelty, gone. What remains is only thought replaying shadows. Now understand something subtle. When Naval Ravikant says experience life, he is speaking from his own lens, his own journey, his own conditioning, his own insights. But human beings make a fatal mistake. They convert another man's truth into psychological law. then suffering begins. But someone like Naval Ravikant, who I admire, wait. You might even be taking in wrong context or wrong interpretation. Yes, very likely. Not because Naval Ravikant is wrong, but because the mind hears through the filter of its own hunger. This is extremely important to understand. A free man can say, experience life, and a psychologically incomplete mind immediately translates it into, I must accumulate experiences to become complete. The same sentence, entirely different meanings. Truth gets distorted by the listener. If a man says, travel the world, one person hears wonder, another hears status. If someone says, love deeply, one person hears openness, another hears, I must desperately find someone or my life is empty. The problem is not the words, the problem is the interpreter. You are listening through the ears of comparison. So when Naval says, experience life, your mind secretly hears, you are behind, you are incomplete, you are wasting your youth. That is not necessarily what he meant. And even if he did mean it that way, why must another man's philosophy become your psychological prison? People worship successful people because they assume, if I think like him, I will become complete like him. But truth is not imitation. A bird flies, a fish swims. If the fish worships the bird, it will drown trying to imitate flight. You must understand, every insight spoken by anyone passes through the listener's conditioning, and conditioning edits reality. Right now, your conditioning is deeply tied to comparison, masculinity, missing out, validation, identity. So naturally, you convert experience life into collect experiences before it's too late. But look deeper. What if experience life simply means to observe, to live awake, to see directly, to encounter existence fully, to not sleepwalk through life? That is entirely different from compulsively collecting experiences. The ego collects experiences, awareness experiences life. Those are not the same thing. The ego says, I need more memories so I can feel like somebody. Awareness simply lives. One is accumulation, the other is presence. You are beginning to notice that your suffering is not actually coming from absence of sex. It is coming from the interpretation, a meaningful life must include this. That interpretation became psychological pressure, and pressure creates fantasy. Fantasy creates obsession. Obsession creates suffering. Then the mind says, once I finally experience it, I will be free. But the self is never free through accumulation, because the self itself is built from accumulation. So yes, you may very well be hearing Naval through the lens of your own psychological incompleteness rather than through clarity, and seeing that may be more valuable than blindly following anyone. Because now you think, if Naval experienced dating and sex and I did not, then my life is smaller. But smaller according to whom? According to thought, according to social comparison, according to the egoic scoreboard, not according to truth. You are not actually suffering from absence of sex. You are suffering from imagined incompleteness. The mind has created an image. A complete man has had these experiences. Then every day you measure yourself against that image. That measurement is suffering. Now be careful here. Do not swing into another illusion. Nothing matters, so I should never experience anything. That too becomes ideology. Truth is simpler. An experience may happen or it may not happen. But psychologically carrying it as identity or psychologically suffering from its absence, both are bondage. You are starting to see that memory itself is not the problem. Identification with memory is the problem. The mind says, I had this, I missed this, I should have done this, I am behind. And suddenly dead moments become living presence. A man who had sex yesterday is already living in memory today. A man who never had sex is living in imagined memory. Both are trapped by thought. One clings to what happened, the other clings to what did not happen. Both are hypnotized. And yes, the ego loves experiences because experiences strengthen the story of me. I am desirable, I am worldly, I am experienced, I am attractive, I am someone. But existence itself has never demanded these things from you. Trees do not need body counts. The sky does not need validation. Life itself has no scoreboard. Only humans invented one. So your understanding is moving in the right direction. That thought is resurrecting dead moments and using them to construct identity and deficiency. And when seen deeply, a strange freedom begins. Not because desire disappears, but because you stop turning desire into self worth. That changes everything. Listen, there was once a man who walked through life carrying an empty cup. Everywhere he went, he looked into other people's cups. One man said, I have loved many women. Another said, I have traveled the world. Another laughed loudly at a tea shop and spoke about nights, kisses, dates, bodies, desire. And the man quietly looked into his own cup, empty, or so he thought. From that day onward, he walked through life haunted, not by absence, but by comparison. He began building fantasies the way prisoners scratch marks into walls. One day, he whispered, I too will fill this cup. And slowly, sex stopped being sex. It became salvation, a certificate, a passport into the kingdom of real men. At night, he imagined saints, women, validation, bodies, moments. Not because the body hungered, but because the self hungered. The self wanted proof. I too have lived. Then one evening, he sat at a tea stall. A girl walked past. For 2 seconds, the mind froze. Desire arose. Fantasy bloomed. Comparison entered. Then she disappeared into the crowd. Gone. The moment died instantly. But thought did something peculiar. It dug the corpse back up. And all night the mind sat beside the corpse saying, what if? What could have been? What am I missing? Other men have lived this life. Do you see the madness? Human beings do not suffer life. They suffer memory, they suffer imagination, they suffer comparison. The actual moment is always brief. A kiss lasts seconds, pleasure fades, the body calms, the night ends. Then thought arrives like a scavenger bird, collecting fragments. And from those fragments, it builds identity. I had this, I lost this, I never got this, I am behind. A man who had sex 10 years ago is still psychologically touching it in memory. A man who had never sex is psychologically touching fantasy. Both are touching shadows. Then one day the man heard Naval Ravikant say, or Kunal Shah say, you have one life, experience everything. And instantly fear entered. Oh no, the mind said. If I do not experience these things, my life will remain incomplete. But look carefully, the mind turned another man's sentence into a prison. What Naval experienced was his path. What Kunal Shah experienced was his path. What another man experienced is his path. Truth is not imitation. If a king eats mangoes every day, must the entire kingdom suddenly feel poor? The mind says yes. Because the mind survives through measurement. It cannot simply look at the moon. It must ask, who saw it first? Who saw it with a lover? Who had the better experience? This is why human beings cannot rest. Even pleasure becomes competition. Even intimacy becomes arithmetic. 3 body counts, 9 body counts, 0 body counts. As if existence itself is counting. As if the stars care. As if the wind asks how many people desired you before allowing you to breathe. One day, the man finally saw something terrifying. His entire suffering came not from life, but from mentally replaying dead moments and imaginary futures. He was carrying a museum of ghosts. Some ghosts were memories, some ghosts were fantasies, some ghosts were comparisons, and he called this burden me. Then something began to loosen, not because desire vanished, not because he became spiritual, but because he finally saw no experience can complete a self that is built out of psychological lack. The self will always ask for another experience, another woman, another validation, another proof. It is a bottomless cup, and for the first time, the man stopped staring into other people's cups. He simply sat quietly at the tea shop. The breeze moved, the tea cooled, voices passed, life happened. Nothing was missing, only thought had said it was. At the end of all this, you may one day realize something astonishing. You were never truly suffering from the absence of sex, or dating, or experiences. You were suffering from the idea that these things would complete the image of you. The mind took fleeting human experiences and turned them into symbols of worth. Then it compared, measured, calculated, judged, and from that comparison, an imaginary incomplete self was born. But life itself never said you were incomplete, only thought did. A kiss comes and goes, pleasure comes and goes, people come and go, youth comes and goes. Every experience dissolves almost immediately into memory, then thought arrives afterward, collecting dead moments like trophies or mourning dead fantasies like funerals. And this collection of memories and comparisons is what most people call me. That is why human beings remain restless even after getting what they want. Because the self is not trying to experience life, it is trying to solidify itself through experiences. But no experience can permanently complete a psychological image because the image itself is made of insufficiency. So the deeper question was never, will I have sex? The deeper question was, why has thought made this the measure of my completeness? And the moment you truly see that, something quiet begins to happen. Not repression, not renunciation, not forced spirituality, just clarity. Then, whether experiences come or do not come, you no longer turn them into your identity. You stop carrying life psychologically. The tea shop moment ends, the girl passes, the fantasy dissolves, the memory fades, and for the first time, instead of replaying life, you simply live it.